Sam, I'm gonna give you a mini tutorial on brushes and why there are so gosh dang many. Texture, you're right, is part of it. Although I will say watercolor is impressively capable of texture. It's just not like thick texture. Like you can't put layers of color on top of each other in the same way. You can still layer stuff, but most of the texture comes from how the pigment is actually like dispersed onto the page. So in watercolor, we actually get texture from like washes and how the brush moves across the page. So watercolor artists actually do have a lot of different brush kinds as well. I just find personally that when I'm using a watercolor brush, it's a lot more versatile. Like I can get a lot more different effects with one brush than I can with acrylic. Mostly because like watercolor is like stain, like it's a stain that lays on top of the page, and like as long as the brush holds water pretty well, you can do most of the things that you need to do with it, except for some things. So when I'm out in public, one of the things that I'm not able to do as much, that's a very popular watercolor technique, is washes, and it's because my brushes are mostly like this one, where they're a fine point. And a fine pointed brush like this is going to be really good for detail work and like filling in shapes and anything that's got specific details. So I can, do a thin line, I can do a thicker line, I can put down like the colors inside of the character with this, or paint the edges of a mountain. But if I want to do the background colors, then I'm going to want something like this, which as you can see is a lot wider of a brush, and the material this is made of is actually more natural. So these are natural fibers rather than synthetic, and they're extremely soft. So these ones, they're still pretty soft, but they hold their shape a little bit better. They're more firm, which is part of why they're so good for detail work. This one, terrible for detail work, but that really thick, soft, natural fur is great for soaking up washes. So this thing can hold a crap ton of water at once with a ton of pigment, which means that when I go down on the page with it, it leaves behind like a really big, nice, even wash across the page, and it's really easy to mix and blend the colors I need in the background. This can't hold nearly enough, and all of the color that I put down would dry before I went back in, so it would leave like a texture instead of the smooth wash of color. And then we also have brushes like this one, which is also extremely soft. It's made of that same natural hair, because this one also holds a lot of water, but you may notice it tapers. And that taper shape, even though this is a watercolor brush specifically, that taper shape allows me to get like a fine point and then to pull it out into another shape as I'm going. So I can do washes, but I can mix a little bit of detail work in, so I can get like edges to my washes, and I can define things a little bit better. So I can still do large shapes, and this is still natural fur, so it still holds a lot of water and pigment, but I can get a bit more precision. It just covers a bit less space. And then this brush is also a natural brush, and this is actually a bamboo brush. Weird, like uniquely expensive, even though if you look at it in comparison, this one looks like it has a better tip, and this one looks like it's loosely defined, but believe it or not, the craftsmanship that went into this brush is crazy. So the glue that's holding it in place, and whoever designed the bristles, you can actually look at brush making videos online of people making brushes. The artist who actually puts the tips of these brushes together aligns them just right. So if I get this wet, the point is fantastic. And this is one of my favorite brushes to use just in general for watercolor. These are also watercolor brushes specifically, and these are synthetic fibers instead of the natural ones, so they don't hold as much water as those synthetic or those natural ones I showed you. But the nice thing about synthetic fibers is they hold their shape a little bit easier, and they're also very smooth and soft, so they leave smooth finishes on the paper. And because they're better at holding their shape, you can get these really, you can even see it on camera, you can get these really tiny, like it's very small, the tip. And these are for detail work. This one is actually a tapered detail tip. Then we've got a fan brush here. This one you can use for like getting splashes of leaves. So if I was doing a pine tree, this fan brush would actually be really useful. You've got this really long one that is kind of like a smooth point when wet, and that loose flexible tip when wet allows me to get like lines that are thin, but it gives me a bit more flow than the other ones, and it lets me hold more water at once, so I can get more graceful lines than I could with this thing. That's a similar amount of thin, but because it's shorter, it's better for detail work and more precision, but I can't get as much water in it at once. So even watercolor has like, there are like 30 to 50 different shapes of classic brushes in watercolor, so there's still a lot of brushes with different purposes. But for me, at least when it comes to my workflow with acrylic, the reason I use more brushes, here's one that I use for acrylics. This is Teflon, so this is that synthetic soft fiber I was telling you about. This one is a flat tipped brush, and you may notice in comparison to some of the watercolor brushes, especially like the thin detail ones, it's a little bit thicker, and the bristles are actually smoother together, and this gives the paint a nice surface to sit on. And when I paint with it, because this is a really nice smooth surface without any like obvious bristles sticking out, because of that, it doesn't leave a lot of texture on the acrylic, and it lets me like glide over surfaces smoothly and apply color. Because one of the things about acrylic is if you press too hard, the paint's just going to move to the side. It's just going to split because it's a solid substance. It's plastic. It's wet plastic. So if you push too hard, it's just going to move out of your way. So you want a soft brush so that the acrylic can. Let's see, is that you could use this for acrylic or watercolor. Here's another fan brush, but the soft smooth texture lets you apply the paint without scraping the paint off, or like especially when you layer paint, you can easily scrape off a layer of paint underneath. So you want a soft brush that's able to lay over the top. I'd say the main reason though that I would use more brushes is actually the color mixing. So acrylic is a lot harder to wash off, as you can see. You still have to wash it when you're done, but to wash off your brush in between every mixing of colors is just so inconvenient. With watercolor, it comes off a lot easier because the only binding agent is gum arabic, and then it's just water. So with acrylic, it's plastic and it's binders of various sorts, so it's a lot harder to wash off. So I prefer to have like a warm color brush, a cool color brush, a blues brush, and a reds brush, so that I don't have to wash off every single brush. So that means I need like 4 of every single kind of brush basically. And also, like if you're working with different effects and you're layering stuff, it's nice to have, like let's say this was my base brush, because of the fact that each of these has a different application and use, like every different shape of brush. You may notice I have a lot of this kind specifically, and also a lot of this kind. But because every single brush has like a different application, I might have this one with white on it, so I can do like details and line art and lighting. I might have this brush for base color and foundation when I first put it on, and I might have like another brush that's got darker colors for shading, and I might have one for like whenever I get to the green trees. So it's mostly a workflow thing rather than like every brush has to be a different kind for different stuff. It's more like I need a lot of brushes at once that are all the same kind or similar, so that I can use a whole bunch. This one's a tapered one. This allows you to get detail work and to do more solid lines, so you can have both precision and wide coverage. These ones are trickier to use though without things getting weird, so technique matters. Anyways, this is what I would consider a small amount of brushes, just so you know. I need like more. This will be enough to start with, but I need more for sure. At least it depends on how intense this is. I at least need better quality ones, because most of these are crappy brushes. Like this is an Artist Loft brush from when I was like 15, so probably got to stock up eventually. But I'll use these for now until I'm like solid and I kind of know what I want, and then we'll reward myself for all my hard work with better supplies eventually.